Sorry about that, listeners. We just had some technical difficulties. Anthony, we have you back on the line.
Yep, how's it going? Sorry
Perfect.
about that.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. So, as we were saying about, we'll wrap up Nylander, then we'll go to our number two and our number one picks for our top five.
Yeah,
So, once again, with Nylander, he does complement, both Matthews and Tavares. But I believe where we had left off was his ability to kind of take some attention away from his line mates because he does have an ability to shoot the puck and a willingness to do that. And then you had mentioned something about his personality, and how it does come across as really aloof. But what I like about it is he comes across as very confident. You would never know if he's had a bad game. What we've seen over the last week and a half since training camp opened is he's always the first one on the ice at practice. There's been reports he's been one of the last ones to leave as well. So, sometimes
he's a rink rat. That's
yeah,
what he is. He loves to be on the ice, and
yes,
the baghead Twitter people will never give him credit for that because he's not gonna swear in an interview
yeah,
after a loss.
yeah. He's not. Yeah, he's not going to take it personally. He kind of just absorbs it, realizes that there's a room for improvement, and then moves on. And which is what we saw this season. And I wish him all the best this upcoming playoffs. But I definitely think under Keefe, with more opportunity either on the power play or some additional ice time, I think we'll definitely see a brand new Nylander this
Yeah,
playoffs.
yeah, and that's not. And sorry, just to let one last thing to add, and that's not to say that not taking it personally is the best way to do it. It's just different
Yeah.
people take it different ways, right?
Yes.
And there's different benefits to it because if you're living and dying with every win or loss, well, if you talk to any professional athlete or you listen to any of their interviews, they'll tell you that that's not the way to go.
Yes.
Living and dying with every loss is not the way to go. But also, it is nice to see, that like when you do take it personally, you don't want that feeling again.
Yes.
So it's a very fickle game. So like I think it's just a dumb argument and
It,
like to use that against them as a hockey player.
because and my biggest argument with that is we don't know what he's like behind closed doors or at home. Like I'm sure he doesn't show his. He's not one that's going to show his emotions on his sleeve necessarily. But who knows what it's like at home? Because I'm sure he did carry a heavy burden last year. And I just think that you start to see. We saw that fire in his belly this season. He scored 30 plus goals, was on pace to have a huge career year. So for me, I have him at number three, not because I'm critical of him, but I want to see that he continues, where he left off this past season. So
Yep.
now for our second pick, who do you have as number two?
So I did hint at this earlier. So Nylander is part of my second pick, I guess we'll say, or second in the power ranking of pressure, I guess you can say, because my overall answer is the big four forwards. So that includes Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. And what's your second?
I went with Tavares. I went with the captain.
Good one.
You know what? You have a letter on your jersey. There's going to be an assumption of responsibility, and his history on the island. That's kind of. I won't go too in depth. We'll go with your. We'll discuss your picks because I'm sure we'll end up covering some of my points in that. Yes.
So basically for the big four, it kind of ties into the Dubas explanation that I gave earlier. Is that really when I would like the biggest realization I took when I did that future Leafs cap or future roster predictions for the Leafs based on this flat cap is that the success of this team is tied to those four guys, and really. And it goes back to what you were talking about with Nylander is that, you know what? He had a fantastic season. Really, all four of them had quite great seasons. Like maybe not Tavares with the numbers, but he was battling an injury. But I still think that he was pretty good. Marner, maybe if you want to nitpick, Marner was relied a lot on the power play. He didn't get as many primary assists. But if that's their down year, their average year, like you can live with it. It's not a fantastic year, but they didn't hinder the team's success. But when you expand the scope of what this team is, it was a very inconsistent team, didn't battle adversity well. Well, those are two things that you need to go on a long playoff run that I just mentioned. And
Yes.
if we are tying our hopes and dreams of winning a Stanley Cup in Toronto, and it's tied to these four guys, they need to show that they can do it in the playoffs. And whether you want to call this 5-game series against Columbus a playoff victory if they win or not, that the guys in that room will call it a playoff victory. And it just, the feeling of just winning one series, you get it out of your mind that you're not clutch or you're not a playoff performer. And I think it's going to do wonders for this team. And Babcock, like it or not, for his methods, because I do think they were really stupid, but he had a lot of quotes that did stick with me, and one of them was your scars or wounds about losing. It does ring true in the playoffs, right? When you lose 3 years in a row, first round, you don't want that feeling again. And 2 years to Boston too, right? Like they need to get over the hump here. And really, they have the four best players in the series when you look at every player that's going to be in the Columbus-Toronto series. These are the four most skilled guys on the team. That will be on the ice. So they need to drive the play. They need to drive the bus. And it's all, and we talk about all the pressure. And we'll get into goaltending later, and I have a feeling that we're going to both have the same number one answer. But these guys need to be the ones that say, okay, guys, we don't have it tonight. Hop on our backs. We'll take us home. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. That they need to have that mentality.
And for me, I went with Tavares on his own. And I just think that as a captain, as a player that hasn't had too much playoff success, even from his previous team with the Islanders, there's reasons for that. But I just think that now coming home, there is an additional layer of pressure that comes with being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That comes with an $11 million contract. There's just that pressure to now take this team to another level. And he's not getting any younger. He's on the tail end of his 20s. So it'd be nice to kind of see Tavares take his career and the Leafs to the next level. And I think you're right. I think, if the team can get past Columbus, it could be that freight train that no one can stop. Because, confidence gets going in that locker room. They start to feel good about themselves, especially with a young team like Toronto, where confidence and success seems to breed more success. Because when the Leafs are on, they're on, and few can beat them. And they showed that with games against Tampa. They showed that in spurts against Boston this year. So they can beat the top echelon teams. Like, didn't they shut out the Pittsburgh Penguins before the season shut down? Or, when they went on that one?
That was, I want to say
like February or March, they went into Pittsburgh.
I think it was February, because I want to say that it was the first game after the David Ayres game, or maybe not. I could, my memory might.
Because that's the one thing with COVID is we're all
me out here.
COVID memories. Things seem so distant now. But they did.
But I do remember that game. They shut them out. I think it was 4-0, 5-0.
Yeah. So this team, when they want to play and when they are going, few teams can beat them. Few teams can chase them. In the speed game, the last thing you want to be giving this team is a power play. But getting back to Tavares, I just think that he now needs to be that leader. When Leaf fans look at previous captains, your Wendell Clarks, your Doug Gilmours, they had that emotion on the ice. They left, their teeth, their blood, and everything on the ice. And I just think that it's now Tavares' time to kind of take the reins and put his name, in the same echelon as your Gilmores, as your Clarks, and even Matt Sundin, who took the Leafs on some pretty deep and memorable playoff runs himself. So that's what I'm looking to the captain to do at this point, is to kind of help the youngsters along and get them to that next level where.
And, and you know what, Pat? It is important to say, given the circumstances of the bubble, is that leadership is going to be very important to create that culture in the room where, like it or not, these players, they're young guys, right? And I'm not going to say we can't trust them to break the bubble or be irresponsible and not social distance or not wear a mask, but I refer to like when I think about leadership in a locker room, I think about a Kyle Lowry quote that I read. I think it was last week, where he basically said, someone asked him about, like, are you worried about the seriousness of the group or keep holding each other accountable in terms of keeping their social distance and not going out of the bubble and et cetera, et cetera. And Lowry frankly said, like, this is a business trip. This isn't vacation at Disneyland, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like the NHL's promoting all this stuff. Oh, they're going to have a lounge for their players to watch the game, and there's going to be food trucks, and there's going to be stuff like that. And you know what? Like, that's all great, because I do think, like, mental health is very important, especially when you play in, like, such a high pressured situation, and that's the profession. But you get paid a lot of money, and almost everyone has been going to work, right?
Yes.
And we talk about, and we can again thank the frontline workers for everything that they've done during this, like, unprecedented time in our world's history. But you guys are professional athletes. Nobody complain about the food. Like, you see some NBA players are complaining about the food and stuff like that. Like, this isn't like a vacation where you're going to be, like, paid to be treated like royalty. This is a business trip. You're there to win a Stanley Cup. And I think that starts with Tavares in the room.
Yeah, most definitely. So now here we are for our final pick, and I think you and I have the same name, but do you want to give our listeners who your number one person on your high pressured list is?
Yeah, so I think mine is pretty obvious, and I think I'm gonna have to go with Frederic Gauthier. Actually, no, I'm just kidding. I couldn't say. I was hoping that. I hope I got some people there, but no, it's Frederik Andersen, and I think it's really simple. Really, 5-game series, goalie has the most effect on a team's performance. No matter if you have four-star forwards like Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander. Freddie Andersen is going to win or lose this series for the Leafs, because if he's average, they still got a shot. But if he has one and a half games where he just can't stop anything, you're going home. So it is so clear that he is the most important, and I'm assuming you have him on as the number one of your list.
I go with the old adage in hockey. You can definitely, you'll definitely lose a series with poor goaltending, but you can really go on a fairly long Stanley Cup run with hot goaltending. Matt Murray showed it.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen goalies come completely out of nowhere and take their team to Stanley Cup victories. And, it's just, Freddie has to be Freddie, and it can't be October Freddie. It's got to be like November, December, January, middle of the season, Frederik Andersen, where, he's relied upon to make the big save. At least keep the guys in the game, because it's going to be tight checking. We may not see big scores. To be honest with you, I think the first game and a half is going to be a wash anyways, while the two teams get their legs underneath them. Even with this training camp, there's nothing like an NHL playoff game to really get going. You know what I mean? Like when you're playing a full 82 game season, you're going into the playoffs. You kind of have that momentum. So he's going to be called upon, very early. I think both goalies are. even when you look at Columbus, whoever's that starting goalie is going to be, you're going to be called upon very quickly, very early to make that big save. Get some, get that rust off, and try and move that team forward. And I think I'm going to be definitely looking for Freddie to be that difference maker earlier. At least in this play-in round.
It's going to be very interesting because the way that both these teams are built is that Columbus doesn't drive a lot of offense, a lot of high danger chances. All right. But again, the Leafs roster or the Leafs defense, and then again, this kind of falls back to Keith, where if he can change the way that they put team defense plays over these last 4 months, and whether it was videos, Zoom calls, and now implementing that in training camp practices. But if Freddie's not going to see the high danger, high volume chances that he would see, like we saw in the last 2 series against Boston, it's going to be very interesting because if you're only when they're playing Boston, he sees 30 to 35, sometimes 40 shots in a playoff game. Where if it's Columbus and you only see 25 shots, no matter how good or bad the Leafs defense is, like that, not letting in a weak goal is like so important, right?
Yeah, it could definitely set. Yeah, it'll be the difference maker in a game.
It's deflating, right? Because
Yes.
if the Leafs are throwing everything they can, they're dominating puck possession and they're in the offensive zone, but Columbus is I can envision a scenario right now where for the first 2 periods, the Leafs are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Columbus, right? And you know what? It's a lot of zone time, maybe a lot of shots, but not a lot of high danger shots. And then, everyone, the puck's going to go the other way sometimes. And someone scores a weak goal for Columbus and Freddie lets in one. I can just envision this team like, all right, Freddie doesn't got it tonight. And then they just crumble. So it's going to be very important that just stop the pucks you can. Because no one, you're not expected, we'd love you to, but you're not expected to save the ones that are, 2-on-0, like the ones that I saw in practice sometimes, like Marner and Mikheyev on a 2-on-0. Marner drops it through his legs. Mikheyev's got an open net. I'm not expecting him to save that one. You know what I mean? Right? But make the save that you're supposed to and then go from there.
Yeah.
So he's just got to settle in. All eyes are going to be on him.
And I think what's going to push him to be driven is the fact that he could lose the goal. In this playoff format,
you're right,
he could drop to number 2. Given the way that Jack Campbell has shown an ability to win the Leafs games, it is imperative on Freddie to have a good season. And let's be honest, Freddie has a contract coming up in a year or 2, and everyone's going to look back on this, on his playoff success or lack thereof. And that's going to be a big determining factor on his next contract. Are you the goalie that can take a team to the Stanley Cup? Are you a goalie that can win around? All this is going to be part of that conversation. So it's imperative on him now to get this team to the next level. And I think, like I said, it's very easy for him to lose the net to Jack Campbell. Jack showed that he can be a difference maker. He had a winning record with the Leafs right before the season shut down. His numbers were respectable. And I definitely look to Freddie to kind of maybe feed off that competition. And, I definitely see Freddie having a pretty good playoff year. At least I expect it to.
Yeah, he's you mentioned he's up for he's UFA 2020 going into the 2021-2022 season. So he's technically eligible for an extension this offseason. Whenever the new version of July 1st is up for this offseason, I think it's sometime in October, I believe. Maybe
October
10th,
November. Yeah, October, November.
10th, I think, or something like that. He's eligible for an extension. And not to get too far down the line, but let's say there's a scenario where, you know what, worst case scenario, like obviously if Freddie's playing bad, we're probably not going on a deep run unless Jack Campbell just pulls a miracle. But let's say that let's say that Freddie doesn't perform well. It's a disappointing loss to maybe not Columbus. Maybe they get through Columbus, but a disappointing loss in the first round to whoever that might be. And then the Leafs don't say to Freddie, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't talk extension right now in this short off season. Play out the season, then we'll talk extension when your contract is actually up. So we do know there's a history of Freddie getting inside his own head sometimes, and he's mentioned that himself, and he says he has been trying to improve that. But what is Freddie like when he's playing without a deal for next season? You know what I mean, right? And
Well,
he's best friends with Austin Matthews, so like that. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but there's a trickle down effect there.
I don't know if there's necessarily a trend. I can't imagine Matthews losing
I'm
endorsement
not
deals
saying he's gonna
because
leave. I'm not endorsement deals. I'm not saying he's gonna leave because Freddie's not on the team, but I'm saying like treating any other guy like you would. Let's say I don't know, like you can't treat Freddie like you did a Connor Brown or something where you just kind of you trade him where you're trading him to a division rival or something like
no,
that. Like
you're
it needs to.
yeah. No, and I think Freddie can see where the next contract's going to go, and he needs to show Leafs management